In 2004 then, a number of educators, scientists, and policymakers got together, about 100, and we met online for 2 weeks to discuss what is important about ocean sciences that every person in the United States should know about. And there's been a development here over the last 20 years of the work that we've done that I'm going to talk about, through to this UNESCO Ocean Literacy for All program that has just been launched. So the ocean is a defining feature, as we all know, because we're all ocean observers, and it's great to be with this community of ocean observers. And if you think about it, as we've been saying over the last couple of days, with such an enormous issue of the ocean, the majority of folks do not understand what the ocean is about. Ocean literacy then means understanding the ocean's influence on you and your influence on the ocean. At least that's the US definition. And there are 7 principles that we came up with, and I'm going to talk a little bit about them. So in the United States, as I said, this group came together, National Science Foundation, NOAA, National Geographic, the Centers for Ocean Science Education Excellence, Sea Grant, Association of Zoos and Aquarium, and our not-for-profit College of Exploration, and then the Lawrence Hall of Science and the National Marine Educators Association, to meet this challenge that the United States population does not know about the ocean. It's not in the curriculum. Marine topics are not taught. How to deal with that? Biological oceanographers said you need to know about biology before you can learn about physical oceanography. Chemical oceanographers thought you should really know about that first. And so the idea was to get a consensus about what is a priority in the ocean science world that we could use in schools to teach science. So that was really the objective. And I want to stress this inclusive, democratic, transparent process, which was mainly done online too in 2004. And we included all the work that had been gone on before. And another key aspect of this was that it had, and has to this day, no institutional ownership. It is totally open, and in that way we have built a spirit of collaboration and cooperation. So what happened then in 2005, we have a definition of ocean literacy. We identified 7 principles and about 44 different concepts supporting them. We aligned them to the national science standards at the time, and you can see them, it's all there on oceanliteracy.net. The work has continued since 2004, 2005, as I've said, over the last number of years. And the work has continued to develop a scope and sequence. So we now have a 700 plus or minus learning nuggets that support the 44 concepts that support the 7 principles. And we've had a number of impacts of this work. And I'll show you a list of conferences, and now obviously it's obvious that we've got UNESCO promoting ocean literacy for all. And as Fabrice mentioned, I've been involved with other efforts that became, this was used as a model. It's an interesting point about a model. Actually, this is it is an interesting point about models, a models maker. This is a written model. But it really is a slow process of transforming our thinking, and I think that's something that I'm still learning. It's taking a while. So those are the other work that we've been involved in. Ocean literacy, earth science literacy, then the climate folks said, oh, that's a good idea. The one that's not in there should be is atmospheric literacy. So there are a number of these work that evolved, frankly, from the leadership that the ocean community took back there in early 2000s. An influence, for example, is this document, and the work that was done was used to guide and inform the exhibit design of the wonderful Sant Ocean Hall in Washington, D.C., part of the Smithsonian. If you come to Washington, do go there. It influenced the USA Next Generation Science Standards, which were published about 3 or 4 years ago, a significant shift in the way and thinking of teaching science. But the fact that the ocean community in the United States, the scientists, the educators, and the policymakers, had got themselves organized and were in regular communication as a community of practice meant that when this revision to the standards came up, we could respond. And the first version of the standards were very, very focused on land issues. They had very, very little marine content. But because we could then respond to that draft, the content now has significant reference to the marine and ocean environment. So the definition that we came up with for the USA was that ocean literacy is an understanding of the ocean's influence on you and your influence on the ocean. It's interesting that the work that we did for the European Union with the EU as part of the Sea Change project, the definition slightly changed to ocean literacy is an understanding of the ocean's influence on us and our influence on the ocean. Just a little change, and I'm being English and American, I'm very interested in how words play roles in our lives. And then the definition went on to say that an ocean literate person understands the essential principles, fundamental concepts, can communicate about the ocean in a meaningful way, and is able to make informed and responsible decisions. Now, this brochure, or this was called a brochure the first time around, was designed for the essential principles of ocean sciences for K through 12, for teaching in K through 12, and it was quite complicated. It had the principles matched to the standards, and it had some very pretty pictures which look good on a wall, and are very useful for teachers. The second version that we had is the essential principles and fundamental concepts of ocean sciences for learners of all ages. So we went to that. It's very much. So there are 7 principles. I think number 1, and I've seen it over the last couple of days, a lot of people refer to oceans, naturally, because there is the Pacific Ocean and the Atlantic Ocean. However, for young people, when they say oceans, it may well lead them to think that they are separate. And so we have been on a mission to remove the S from the word ocean. So I would encourage you to think about that and possibly apply it to your work. The ocean has one big ocean with many features. Shapes the ocean and life in the ocean shape the features of the Earth. The ocean is a major influence on weather and climate. And interestingly, this changed in the second version. The ocean makes to made, or went from made to makes Earth habitable. Actually, I still get that confused. It's an interesting distinction. The ocean made Earth habitable is now what we're saying. The ocean supports a great diversity of life and ecosystems, and we heard about that this morning. This number 6 I have a little trouble with sometimes because it's a bit of a tongue twister. The ocean and humans are inextricably interconnected. I'd like to sort of see that revised somehow to make it. And then the ocean is largely unexplored, number 7. And I wanted to talk a little bit about the scope and sequence. On the website, it was felt that for teachers they would need more depth, and so about 40 of us gathered over a number of months, a couple of years, 2006, 2007, to develop a conceptual flow diagram for each one of the principles that referenced each of the concepts and further develop them into this scope and sequence. So if you find this circular diagram on oceanliteracy.net, you will be able to access a conceptual flow diagram for each principle for different grades, different age groups. And it's broken down in essence to about 700 different learning pieces. If you wish to pursue that. And there's linkages both vertically and horizontally for the learning pattern that is suggested in this way. So more information on that, as I said, at the 2 websites that I have some responsibility for, oceanliteracy.net and oceanliteracy.eu. So these are the set of conferences that happened between 2000 and 2009. And it started to be recognized internationally. For example, in Tokyo, Professor Tioshi in Tokyo at the Tokyo TUMSAT picked up on this, and I'll show you what he did in a minute, and various other ocean literacy summits, one in Chile, where I had the privilege of going to Chile. That was a lot of fun. There's a group in the northeast of the United States that now has summits every 2 years. They've got one coming up this year. Do look that up and come to the northeast. And I need to give a shout out to Jan Says over there, who was one of the folks here in Europe who pioneered the opportunity in Europe by organizing the first conference on ocean literacy in Europe at Bruges with the sponsorship of Liz and the Marine Board and others. And that really helped set in motion this European focus on these two words, because the words ocean literacy were put in the Galway Agreement, which has enabled the EU then to sponsor ocean literacy work. This has meant we've done work on a transatlantic ocean literacy concept and had several meetings on that, and the next one is coming up in Newcastle in 2018. We had the first global ocean literacy workshop in Annapolis, and as I've just said now, the UN has picked up on this with UNESCO. We did a conference at the UN conference in June, a side event which has gathered the momentum to develop the Ocean Literacy for All conference. So I wanted to review a lot of what has been going on globally briefly. I'm not going to do justice to everybody, but I do want to highlight some of those that have been important in this global work to give you a sense of the global context of the take-up of this idea. The first really significant effort was Portugal. And all credit to Ana Noronha and Ciencia Viva for picking up on the effort that we did in the States and embracing it, but following the process which I talked about earlier of broad participation, transparency, engagement of many scientists and educators and policy folk in the discussion about what is important in the ocean for Portugal. And they took the term ocean literacy, which you cannot really translate into Portuguese, and I will now do a bad job of pronouncing it, but it's conhecer o oceano, which is to know the ocean, essentially. And they follow the same sort of pattern and the model that we have for Portugal, and they have a website on the Ciencia Viva website for that. They've also been a large promoter of the Blue Schools project, and there's how many, maybe 20 or 30 blue schools in Portugal. They've really been working to promote ocean literacy in Portugal. I mean, that's right there on their website, and to frame ocean literacy within the educational agenda. So there's a lot more there on the Ciencia Viva website and the Blue Schools website. I'd like to talk about the Galway Statement, a very important development in US, Canadian, and European relation. This was a significant development in cooperation and partnership building, which is bearing all kinds of fruit, particularly with the seabed mapping, which has been the first efforts along with agriculture. And ocean literacy has a very important point, and there is a ocean literacy working group of Canadians, Americans, and Europeans that are working on how to align and develop resources and so on. So that's ongoing, and we developed an agreement on ocean literacy principles for transatlantic cooperation. So the EU has funded Sea Change, which has just come to an end and responsible to EU projects. The EU has put up €6 million over the last 3 years. Sea Change now has a legacy program based on the concept of ocean literacy, ambitious aim to change the way Europeans view their relationship with the ocean. And let me just stress those words. I think understanding your relationship to the ocean, my relationship, that's what this is aimed to do. But long-term goals are to get ocean topics into schools, and that's a very real challenge, which of course would then lead to ocean literate citizens, which would then hopefully lead to ocean literacy decision makers and entrepreneurs. And so there's a number of objectives there. I want to also highlight the great work of a group of colleagues now and of ocean scientists and ocean educators around the Mediterranean who picked up on this idea. And they've developed and taken the Ocean Literacy Guide, and they've created one for the Mediterranean. And they have aligned the ocean literacy principles in this guide with what they're calling Mediterranean Sea Literacy Principles. And that you can find off the website mcemsea.eu. So I'm going to have to quickly go through the rest here. So Responsible, I've got some ocean literacy webinars coming up. Fiona told me about the UK Schools Resort Hub, and I just highlighted their focus on ocean literacy. The Irish have developed a website and are beginning to develop their own Irish ocean literacy network, which is great to see. Our friends in Italy have done some great work with developing Ocean Literacy Italia and working with industry and with large yacht owners as a starting point, translated them into Italian. Right, we did the conference in New York, I talked about that. The Ocean Literacy for All is a publication that you can download off the UNESCO website. It has somewhat of the presentation I'm just giving now and a description of ocean literacy there. You're going to hear from my colleague and friend Mohammed on Bangladesh in a minute. Japan, Chiyoshi and his colleagues have ocean literacy in Japan, and they have also sort of evolved it to aquatic and marine environmental literacy. Taiwan, very important. Taiwan has probably one of the most integrated marine education curriculums and efforts in schools probably that I've seen. A very fantastic effort. Emily King and COSI, the Center for Ocean Science Education Excellence in China, have taken this ocean literacy work and have developed a number of programs and translated them into Chinese. And I also want to give a shout out to the folks in Australia, the Pelican, which is a program where you have an indigenous Aboriginal elder, auntie, working with my friend Harry on this ship, taking Australians and indigenous children out together to share their stories and to learn together on the water about marine science. Absolutely beautiful, quintessential, what we need to be doing. Okay, and there's Harry with Are You Ocean Literate on the back of his shirt. A little bit of a shout out to Russell in South Africa. Some very real challenges. Don't wish to minimize them at all that he has in South Africa, but he is moving ahead with the marine curriculum. They're developing a marine curriculum for South Africa, which is very encouraging. A few thoughts. I'm just going to run over a little bit of time, if I might, because I think looking forward to the next 20 years, here are some thoughts. I mean, for example, Toulouse was important in the GeoTraces program I learnt recently. So local relevancy, as you've seen from these examples around the world, there needs to be local relevancy. Let's make the connection to water, to river, to sea, to ocean. The word ocean is something that's very much in the forefront in the United States. I grew up in England, we went to the seaside. These words matter. Let's make sure it's participative and collaborative, and that people maintain ownership of what it is. What it does is it sparks conversations about what does it mean to you, to me, and to us, and what are we going to do about it. So the term, I think Jan said this, don't worry about the two words ocean literacy. It's, in a sense, it's a symbol. It's a way of getting on with understanding our relationship with the ocean. And let's use it as a process for creating local and global understandings of our relationship to the ocean. And the other thing about it, as you can see, it's taken off independently, sort of like just people picking up on it, and it enables you to have a clear voice in a very cluttered communication space, which I'm sure that Jan will talk about. So that, I think, is essentially the nub of it. I'm not going to, come back to my P's, partnerships, participation process, and so on. So I wanted to also recognize that the GeoPlanet, there's the opportunity. We need an ocean literacy initiative in the blue GeoPlanet space now. So, I'm 64, and when I get older and I'm 84, let's see how we can realize ocean literacy as part of Priority 7, part of the UNESCO Literacy for All idea, and engage with the Blue Planet community. I look forward to that. So let's add the missing voices, indigenous people, SID, small island developing states, traditional knowledge, business, and continue the conversation. Quick plug for the MC conference, come to Newcastle in October, and there's a conclusion. Let's go and really have systemic change around the world. Let's get the ocean and marine topics into every curriculum. Let's have every child understand their relationship to the ocean, and let's build an ocean literate world. Thank you all very much.